morning. My name is I'm head of business development at PolTREG. Children are our future. Let them make the most out of it. Fortunately, we are not an insurance company, so don't have to worry. So, unfortunately, the future for children with diabetes type 1 is not so bright and not so joyful. Diabetes type 1, contrary to diabetes type 2, is a genetic condition resulting in autoimmune aggression towards pancreas, TREG, the organ that is responsible for controlling glucose level and producing natural insulin. I hate this, thank you, different voices. Diabetes type 1 means a lifestyle change for the whole family because the child after diagnosis is completely has a lifelong dependence on external insulin. It's a deadly and costly disease. Deadly meaning that after diagnosis child lives up to 13 years shorter, and costly meaning that cost of care over diabetic patients is 3 times more than any other patient. The incidence of type 1 diabetes is increasing year by 3%. Currently, there are nearly 2 billion children around the world. Well, I'm speaking about children because diabetes type 1 is a predominantly juvenile adolescent condition, meaning that most of the cases are diagnosed up to 14 years of age. We know that over 80,000 children are each year diagnosed with diabetes around the world. The markets that we are trying to approach are mainly US and Europe, which represent the most cases, well, nearly 50% of all cases around the world. What our value proposition is that we address the underlying cause of the disease. We do not only mitigate the effects of the disease, we try to reinstate the natural balance of a body to control glucose level by its own. We do it by restoring natural function of the pancreas, the organ that is once again responsible for producing of natural insulin and controlling glucose level. And by doing so, we also reduce the risk of developing complications, which are the most cost-driving, which have the most cost-driving impact on healthcare over diabetic patients. Our therapy shows the reduction of insulin intake. The therapy is being held at Gdańsk, at the Medical University of Gdańsk, at the University Clinical Center. The technology has been tested and is being tested since 2010. We have done 30 patients, and in all of these cases we observe reduced insulin intake, and even in 2 cases we observe that the girls have returned to insulin independence. Our research findings and results of this therapy have been published in many respected journals, most lately in the Science, which is the holy grail of scientific publications. The technology is mainly based on drawing blood from a child. Approximately 1/4 of a liter of blood is taken from a child and is processed in a strictly controlled environment in a GMP laboratory. GMP means good manufacturing process. This is the highest level of standard in any laboratory. Also clean rooms, etc. So a facility that big pharmaceutical companies have at their disposal. We then process this blood in we sort specific cells and expand them for 14 days. After 14 days of expansion, we observe up to 100 to 1,000 multiplication of TREG cells. TREGs are T regulatory lymphocytes. After expansion, we administer them once again to the blood system. The technology has been patented in Poland, and we await patent decision in a PCT scheme in Europe, US, India, China, and Japan also. Our competition can be divided into at least 2 groups. There are many approaches to treating, curing diabetes. It has to be noted that the current mode of treatment of diabetes is nearly the same as 100 years ago in 1922. First patient received external insulin, and this technology hasn't really changed since then. There are many, as I mentioned, there are many approaches. Most of them rely to organ-related therapies, mainly transplantation of islets that are responsible for producing natural insulin, and artificial pancreas. Both of these technologies are in early clinical stages, and in terms of negative effects, we observe complications in transplants, in every transplant. There are also research done on vaccines based on enteroviruses and peptides. These researches are in very, very early clinical phase or even preclinical phase. There are also drugs based on antibodies and inhibitors, and most of these researchers have stopped at the phase 3 clinical trial because of low efficacy. We also have, well, insulin and insulin pumps, which do not really cure the disease, they just mitigate the effects. Yes, and stem cell therapies, which are also in phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials, and they replace the destroyed cells. And what we do is we address the underlying cause of the disease, so we restore the balance in the immune system. The market, in calculating our market potential, we have taken into account at least few factors, mainly population in the EU and US, the incidence, so the number of patients that develop the disease each year in 100 population, the patients that can qualify, because not all patients can qualify for the treatment, and market coverage rising from 1% in 2021 to 10% in 2026, and also the price of our therapy. So we have come across with this quite big number, in 60 million euros in 2026. I have produced this calculation for 2026 because it's only after we can get market approval by the EMA and FDA so that we can introduce this therapy throughout the world. And also the countries that we are targeting, as I have mentioned, that are in the EU and US are in the first 10, well, excluding Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, of the countries with the highest incidence number in the world. Regarding the progress of our company, we are quite a young startup. We were founded in July 2015, and we have since then gathered almost 3 million euros in research, grants, seed funding, and most lately in Horizon 2020 SME instrument, phase 1 for cell technologies, for the uptake of cell technologies. And regarding clinical and regulatory affairs, we have signed an agreement with the University Clinical Center in Gdańsk to deliver preparations for patients that are waiting on a waiting list for the therapy. We have also designed a kind of model for some licensing this technology, and we are now starting the negotiations with the European Medicines Agency to learn the regulatory pathway towards market approval. We are meeting with the Committee for Advanced Therapies and Innovation Task Force in July. Regarding the investment need, what we would like to receive is in a region of 10+ million euros to finish our GMP construction of our GMP laboratory and to prepare ourselves for phase 2 clinical trials, or prepare ourselves for scientific advice meetings with the EMA and maybe even with the FDA. In phase 1 of this investment, we would like to receive 1 million euros to finish our GMP laboratory and to start implementing this technology in a hospital exemption rule in Poland. Hospital exemption rule is an exemption allowed by the European Commission to introduce cell therapies that answer unmet medical needs in a kind of fast track or accelerated approval. And this 1 million euros will also help us to scale up the production of our technology, so move it towards a kind of pre-industrial scale. In phase 2 of investments, in a region of 9+ or 10+ million euros, we would like to carry out clinical trial phase 2 in the EU. Business opportunity for our investors can be divided into at least 3 scenarios. We see to realize their investment or to receive a substantial yield from the investment. An investor, it depends on really on the time frame and the horizon of each investor and what is his or her motivation. The quickest method of receiving a return on investment would be to help us realize the hospital exemption rule in Poland and also introduce it to other EU countries that allow also this rule. Where we would also like to approach an industry venture capital from Europe that would help us to commercialize, internationalize this technology. There is also a form of commercialization by sub-licensing the technology, mainly in a way of out-licensing to a big player, big pharma, or co-development with also a big player, big pharmaceutical company like Roche, Novo Nordisk. And also direct sales, which is the best way or the best model with the highest yield from the investment, mainly in royalty-free launch products. So in after 2021, we hope that we can introduce this therapy to national reimbursement in the EU. The team that is responsible for developing this technology consists of 8 people, 5 of whom are involved in business operations and 3 that were co-founders of the company and authors of the patent are shown here. And we also cooperate with experienced advisory companies in London and Switzerland for regulatory affairs, clinical study design, and we also cooperate with an investment advisory firm. So thank you very much for your attention.
Two quick questions. The first, application of your therapy. Does it allow or is it conflicted with the regular therapy? Do you still continue the regular therapy your child is on, or you replace it?
Yes, in 30 cases that we have data on right now in a one-year follow-up of the clinical trial, phase 1 in Gdańsk, we observed that some of the children, well, all of them have a substantially lower intake of external insulin, so they do not really go back to where they were because it's mainly affected by a time frame of diagnosis. So yes, you continue taking insulin external, but in a much lower dosage, and your life is more comfortable. And in 2 cases, with a drug combined in one of the research drugs, we observe complete insulin dependence. So the girls, after 1 year, are still, they do not have to take insulin at all, external insulin.
And on the business model, the actual distribution, is it like classical drugs through pharmacies, or?
No, not exactly, because it is an autologous treatment, so the tregs, so the cells, are only from a child and are for the child that they were taken from. So it's rather a service. Yes, it's a therapy, it's a rather service, not really a product.
I have a question on, assuming that you're reaching all the approval levels, how many laboratories you will need for, let's say, to supply Poland? Is it 1 or more? And then, going to the West, let's say, German market, will you need to build additional ones over there, or can you service them from Poland?
Well, since cell therapies are quite a new thing, new kid on the block for the medical world, the therapy has to be conducted in less than 2 hours after finishing of the expansion of tregs. So each hospital has its own kind of facility or a laboratory that will be able to process the tregs and to administer them to the body. But this is not a problem because we have been contacted by venture capitals and providers of such facilities in Europe 2 weeks ago when I was in London on a conference. So mainly all of the main hospitals in each country has in its vicinity within 2 hours of reach a kind of laboratory that meets the criteria.
What kind of additional investment would be needed by them in order to be able to do the therapy that you're proposing?
You mean after approval or before or?
Well, so what's the level of investment? So you said that within the 2 hour reach of each of the hospitals that would be generating the demand for your product. There are facilities which meet the minimal requirements or whatever, but there's probably some additional investment that they each need to take. So what's the level of investment that each would need to take?
Well, the construction and validation of a GMP laboratory costs approximately $2 million, €2 million. So should specific location do not have kind of laboratory that is needed, so it's €2 million, dollars, or whatever. No, maybe not whatever, not pesos. But for a laboratory that is already in a GMP level or quite close to GMP, so the amount of money will be much lower. But on what margin, I really don't know, because it depends on each situation, really.
But at least in the hundreds of thousands?
Yes, this may be the number.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, so please give them a great